I want to take some time to talk about two movies that I think represent deviancy, specifically sexual deviancy that's very close to, not, I wouldn't even say close, but it can kind of give you some insight into the types of men that I worked with for a long time in corrections. Hi, my name is Dr. Natalie Jones. I'm a licensed therapist, and I spent many years working with men who have sex offenses, a number of offenses, including child sex offenses, rape, all those sorts of things. And there are two movies in Hollywood, trigger warning, by the way. So if this offends you or if this is too tough for you, please feel free to skip this video. But I don't think anything comes close to as close, but there are some movies that come closer to others in terms of portrayal of sex offenders than others. And so it can kind of give you some insight into what to look out for when working with these when dealing with these personality types, rather is what I meant to say. So if you have one that's a boyfriend, and many people do, a father of your child, or one that's a neighbor, because there's lots of you that have them as neighbors, and you may not know unless you go and look up on the I forget the name of it, but it's like the registered sex offender, and you could type in your zip code and see how many pop up close to your home. But anyhow, two of them that stand out in my mind, and this one is a little bit more, a little bit less like the men that I worked with, that it got a little bit more hallmarky, I would say. It's The Woodsman, with Kevin Bacon, and it's a phenomenal performance by Kevin Bacon, where he's a registered child sex offender, and I don't really hear anybody talk about this movie. It's kind of a dark film, and in the movie, he's a sex offender. He's gone to jail, and he's basically fighting his demons to not offend every day, which is very similar to the work that I did with sex offenders, where a lot of them, they would get released, but they kind of want to come back if it was some a habit or a behavior that they really wanted to kick, and that they would just have all this anxiety, but they couldn't stop themselves from going to places where kids were, such as playgrounds, or trying to get close and have children physically be on them and touch them in ways that are inappropriate. The way that it got to be a little bit hallmarky for me was that, and a little bit less realistic, is that, in the movie, Kevin Bacon tries to help the child that he wants to offend against. And so he's sort of coaching the child on how to stay away from predators. At least from what I recall, it's been many, many years since I've seen the movie. What made me think of it was I saw that they had released it again on Tubi. So I don't even know if it was the original format of what it was, because sometimes, movies with respect to children, a lot of times now in more recent years, they adapt them from what it was when it first came out. So that's movie number one. Movie number two, that was a little bit more graphic, but again, I think more closely demonstrates or portrays the personality of people who are sex offenders, who do it on a regular, is Kiefer Sutherland in the movie Eye for an Eye, with him and Sally Field. I felt like that was a very strong performance, where he had this rage that he had to get out, but then he also kept ruminating on it and was taunting, Sally Field and her other daughter and things like that, and just couldn't keep himself from, revisiting the crimes, so to speak, and trying to weasel his way closer into their lives. Again, it didn't get as close as it could have. But again, I think there's only so much that they can portray for TV audiences without scaring the bejesus out of everyday people, or, due to censorship and things like that, which I can totally understand. But I thought his character did a beautiful job of um, capturing the sadistic um, behavior in the line of thinking, the language, the harassment, and things like that. The cruelty, also just sort of the daydreaming about his actions, about the offenses that he committed. So that can give you in some insight to that level of criminal and pathological thinking. And I think that's as close that Hollywood can get. I think another honorable mention that's a very hard watch is Megan is Missing. Megan is Missing is very dark, but that's more somebody who's very sadistic. And again, I feel like that's, and I know this sounds horrible to say, I feel like even Megan is Missing is very hallmarky when it comes to a true sadistic sociopath. With a true sadistic sociopath, you don't even want to be in the room with them, and you could feel it immediately. And I think that was something that they tried to portray again in Silence of the Lambs, the movie. But again, I think they missed the mark. They had a couple of the peculiar behaviors, but Megan is Missing, I think, hits closer to home than I think Hannibal Lecter does in terms of actual portrayal. But Hannibal Lecter was actually pretty dark as well. Ed Gein was another deviant. Somebody reminded me of that the other day about how he targeted women and then wore their skin and things like that, Leatherface. That was a very dark character, and there's been many different portrayals of him, and but no one has ever really gotten to. I don't think any film has ever really gotten to the darkness of the true darkness, or embody the true darkness of that character fully. And I definitely worked with, people that committed different types of offenses in prison as well. But I wanted to kind of talk a little bit about the sexual deviants and predators and things of that nature. I don't think any movie really gets too close, but some are closer than others. But there's men that walk around that have their hands in their pants all the time, have a heart on all the time, wanting to have sex all the time, masturbating all the time. And I, even in Psych Emergency, when I worked in there for a while, there would be men that would be brought in, and they would need to kind of be supervised before they could be re-released and things like that. But sexual deviancy and just that thinking, usually when you're around a deviant, they are a deviant 24/7. And that's why I think that's the difference between Hollywood and in real life, is that some of these characters seem to come out of it to be a good guy, like what you see in The Woodsman, versus others of it that stay in it 24/7, like what you saw in Eye for an Eye, but that are always violent in some way, that are looking for a way to get their needs met through that violence in some capacity. They're always looking for some way to be violent. They always have to have it, or they're fantasizing about it. If so I'll stop here. But anyway, if you want to listen to my podcast, A Date with Darkness, it's been on for a number of years. I've interviewed a number of guests, and be sure to sign up for that, linked in my bio. Also, my newsletter is linked in my bio, so be sure to sign up for that, and the community that I'll be sending out soon. Thanks so much.